Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Resident Evil Remake. In the last part we reached the guardhouse here outside the mansion. Now we're going to continue through this place. More specifically, at the end of the last part we investigated one specific room and got ourselves the 01 key, which we need to take back to the first hallway here in this area and open a door with. Make sure you climb these boxes again, by the way, because otherwise you will get slapped by a tentacle and just take some unnecessary damage. I've had that happen more times than I'd like to admit because I'm just not thinking or looking somewhere else when I'm playing this game sometimes. Like that in a very specific room in both scenarios of Resident Evil 2 Classic. I take either some unnecessary damage or dying if I'm not paying attention because I just check my phone or look up and talk to someone really quick while that exact scene's going on. It's unfortunately consistent. So we're in this bathroom, and we want to actually echo something we did earlier in the game. The bathtub in this room is filled to the brim with water. We want to drain that sucker. But thankfully at the bottom of this one, there's not another zombie. Instead, there is just our next key. This is the control room key in specific. Just be careful because the moment you do that, guy right there starts standing up, and we don't want to deal with him. I think he can theoretically follow you into the next room as well, but he doesn't always in my experience. In here, we got a file we want to read, as well as an item we want to really grab. Right here is a self-defense gun, but alongside it, a suicide note. June 22nd, 1998. I had to do it. We ran from those things, helping each other to survive, but Robert started to show the symptoms. I had to do it. Those damn things are pure evil. There was no other way. He would have done the same if it were the other way around. After I put him out of his misery, I just had to leave him in the bathroom. Now I'm probably the last one. How could this happen? I'll never forgive myself for being a part of this project. Eventually I'll get what's coming to me, though. There's no way to escape this nut house. It's just a matter of time now. Everything's set. All I need is a little courage to get it done. Knowing that I'll leave many things left undone is regret beyond words. But this is better than just waiting to turn into one of them. Please understand and at least let me end my life as a person. There's a message on the back. Linda, please forgive me. Uncomfy. And it's meant to be because it really helps the atmosphere around here, but damn if it doesn't send a shiver up my spine. So, the self-defense gun. It only holds one bullet. But it's a magnum bullet, so it's still one of the most powerful things in the game to use against any boss fight or normal enemy. In the case you don't have the normal magnum yet, in case you either didn't grab the wind crest yet or you ignored it earlier and waited until later like I potentially hinted you could do. Not too bad to have around for certain boss fights. In fact, I do take it into the next boss fight, but I would recommend just using the one bullet that it comes with and then storing it away, honestly, as that's a very inefficient use of your inventory space on the whole, I guess is the way I should put it. So now that we have the control room key, we want to head back towards the other half of the guardhouse. And you might remember we saw a ladder down behind one of the bookcases in the room I was already in. We want to go down there now that we have this control room key. I do want to take this moment to talk about another notable staff member, though. This time it's the script translator slash voice director, Shinsaku Ohara. His first project over at Capcom was on Dino Crisis 2 as a planner, but then he was on the translation team for Code Veronica X. He was a script translator and VO coordinator for Devil May Cry 1. He was an FMV and localization advisor for Resi 0, and then he was on this, of course. But after this, he worked on Beautiful Joe in the same role as well as Dino Crisis 3. He would later do the same role for Resident Evil 4, as well as being a producer for Dead Rising 2 and its DLC. But after being a producer roughly for Ninja Gaiden Z, he actively wasn't with Capcom as actively anymore. Instead, he seemingly left to work alongside Mikami over at Tango Gameworks, as he worked as a producer on The Evil Within as well as its DLCs. Ghostwire Tokyo, he was a producer. Hi-Fi Rush, he was still a producer before the dissolution and then revival of that company. God, that was such a mess of a situation. Ugh. Alright, this room's kind of slow, and it wasn't the original game. We gotta push these 3 boxes into that water to make a bridge. There's a door you can see over there, but it is locked from this, from the opposite side, so we cannot get there yet. Every Resident Evil, the classic style, has a room like this. I feel like it's almost a running joke, in a way. It's not that it's hard, it's just kind of tedious, but it doesn't take that long all the same, so it's not that big a deal. It's one of those rooms I come across every playthrough and go, here we go, and then just do it. No other further complaints. Next up in our brief jaunt through the game's development staff is Hideki Motozuka, who was the lead engineer, so effectively lead programmer. His first role was on the PC release of the original Resident Evil as a room editor, which he would later do for the Saturn release as well as director's cut. He was a scenario programmer for Resident Evil 2, but he was also a programmer for every version of Mega Man X4. And he would become a sound programmer for Resident Evil 3. He would later do some technical cooperation for Devil May Cry, as well as being one of the programmers for PN03. But after being in the special thanks for Beautiful Joe, Red Hot Rumble, and a sound driver for Okami, he seemingly would leave Capcom to work at Ubisoft in some form, given his next few roles are Pets Dog's Family and Pets Nursery 2, Just Dance 2014, South Park Fractured But Whole as a senior producer, and most recently Rocksmith, of all things. Bit of an interesting career, that one. Time for the area here in the guardhouse that got the biggest overhaul on the whole. Welcome to the Aqua Ring.
Richard! Chris! Chris, stop! No! Richard.
Poor Richard. Man was unsavable from the venom no matter what in the original game. And even if you save him from that here, he either gets eaten by a shark, or the next time we encounter a certain snake, he gets eaten by that. Man just does not make it out of this mansion. So the Aqua Ring here is a little tense. You want to hug the outer wall to be a little safe from the baby sharks? But if you look, there is actively a mama shark down there, the one that ate Richard, and as the music builds, it's getting closer to just one-shotting you, so you need to hurry over to this door and get the hell in there to be as safe as you can. Even knowing how much time I have in there, it never feels comfortable. It's just so unsafe feeling, which is very intentional, of course, but compared to the other times the game does that, it feels a lot more dastardly. So in the original game, this entire section was like one O-shaped room with water that's about shin deep that the sharks were swimming through, and you could largely ignore the sharks. We can no longer ignore the sharks in the same way, of course. This is, I think, the area that got absolutely changed for the better because in the original game, it just felt like such an afterthought. This area is cool as hell. I mean, it's also one of the most stressful as someone who's, deeply afraid of getting anywhere near deep ocean waters. There's a reason my least favorite Colossus in Shadow of the Colossus is the one that's slightly underwater. If you know, you know. So the only other door out of the room is held in place by water pressure, of course. So if we want to get further into the Aqua Ring, we need to find a way to drain the water, which hopefully this little lab area over here has a way to do. Map of the area over here, nice to have, even as small as it ultimately is. For right now, I actually want to read the whiteboard over here because it contains some, I think, slightly randomized key information. Caution, in case of a drop in oil pressure control, open valve number 3. I believe that could be valve 1, 2, or 3 from memory. A pressure shelter. Well, that's nice to know. Controls for the main system. Everything seems to be in proper working order. Alright, so maybe over here. An error is being displayed. Something appears to have gone wrong when the water was being drained. There's a switch to drain the water. Press it.
Emergency. Unknown source of pressure detected. Locking all doors to achieve maximum safety.
So, the sharks are trying to break the windows down. That critical percentage is a timer. If it reaches over a certain threshold, the windows crash open and you die. You need to follow a very specific order of operations, hitting the switches around here, releasing the safety over at the main computer, hitting the main lever over here at the pressure system. We then need to hit whichever one of the canisters that this whiteboard mentioned to open over here in the corner, and then go back over there to try lowering the shutters again by also releasing the safety again. It's surprisingly strict, but on our first playthrough is when it's at its worst because you're going to be going about wildly a little more because you don't know what's going on. It's a very small order of actions, but it's stressful. I believe on my practice run of this, I reached over 50%, but here 30 is decently fast. And afterwards, now that the shutters are down, we can just go back over here and release the safety once again and actually drain the water, making the sharks pretty much no longer a threat. Thus, we can go through the other door now. This area isn't that large, but I do enjoy it a lot, but at the same time it is probably where I'm at my most stressed in the game, even on repeat playthroughs, but the effect of thalassophobia really does go a long way with that. I would like to be nowhere near the water in any emergency like this. Seeing movies like The Abyss as a relative youngin' probably did not help with that. So through here, we're now going to be in the main chunk of the Aqua Ring, but on a lower floor of it. But because of our actions earlier in the LP, we're actually going to find a bonus item here. Namely, because we saved Richard from his venom, albeit he still met his unfortunate fate, we can find his shotgun on the ground. I believe it has a stronger damage ratio, but the big thing is higher rate of fire and a higher capacity. I am going to be depositing the main shotgun we have. The next opportunity I have, I think I do try to use the 5 shells it has first, potentially, but yeah. I believe the sharks flailing around can still grab you, so be careful of that, by the way. There's Big Mama Neptune. We want to get on this platform, because there's something we want to get up here. Next boss fight of sorts is the Neptune. We want to grab the key that just dropped in the water, but if we get too close to her, she eats you whole. So I'll push that in the water and come over here. This is the generator for the water control system. Pull the lever down. Yes. I believe you can just pump her full of lead and she'll die eventually, but with that instant kill option there, you might as well take it. Thus, we get another key for the residence, meaning we need to now go back to the main part of the guardhouse and go do things over there again. Now, if memory serves, because it's been a while since I last played the game in such a way where I went back to the screen that I'm about to talk about, but if you go back to the place where you pushed the 3 wooden boxes into the water, that water also got drained by the water ring being drained, so we can't use that route to get back up to the guardhouse. Thankfully, there's just another door in our relative vicinity we can use, namely this one over here. This is going to ultimately lead us towards where that locked door was in that same room with the 3 boxes. But make sure you have an inventory space opened up because, hello, despite it being in our area that probably would have had too much water to make them useful, that's our first full clip of Magnum rounds, and trust me, you're going to want those. To be specific about our next destination, we want to hit up the door in the middle of the hallway that led to where the map was, as well as the room that led us here, as that is the gallery door, and I believe if you investigate the residence keys back, it says gallery on it. Or maybe it says 003. It's been a little bit. Ultimately, it's the only other door you have it unlocked that we can see at this point in the guardhouse, so not many options in that regard. Something I do like about classic Resi in general is that you have so many options at the start, but as you start grabbing new items and accessing new places, your options really do thin in a way I find satisfying. It's like the closer you get to your goal, the more clear it becomes. There's something about that that just kicks ass to me. While I go use that key and then go to the item box to grab the self-defense gun because I want to use it coming up, let's talk about the next person in the game staff I want to highlight. Kenichi Ueda, who is the lead character and creature artist. Notably, this is a different Kenichi Ueda than the one who usually is credited as Saru in Capcom games, who's an environmental artist. This is the one that's often credited as Ken in the case they did shorthand. This one's credits started on Street Fighter 3 New Generation in the arcades as a character designer, which they would then do for Resident Evil 3, Street Fighter 3 Double Impact, Plasma Sword. They were an object motion developer. They did animation for Devil May Cry. Resident Evil 0, they were a model and motion design director. Piano 3, they were an animator for the player character. They did concepts in cinematic directing for Resident Evils 4 and 5. Dragon's Dogma, they were a lead NPC and enemy animator. Dual Destinies for Phoenix Wright, they were a illustrator. They were a designer for Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, and they are still at Capcom at this day, working on things like Monster Hunter Stories as a motion animator. In Street Fighter 6, they were an animator for the Fighting Ground mode, and they were the art director in general for Exoprimal, which, as much of a weird misread as that game was for what Capcom fans wanted, it looked neat. If only I cared more about the genre. So, word of warning. Like I mentioned earlier, if you investigated the hole where the map in this hallway was, some bees would enter the room. the moment we enter the gallery, those same bees are going to be all over the room, and they'll start gunning for you immediately. So learn the layout quickly. There are 2 key items in here. My goal is the first one, to get which we need to go about halfway across the room, turn left, and then at the end of the small hallway where you see there's going to be a corpse holding said key item, at which point I want to immediately leave the way we came in. A corpse with a contorted expression of pain on his face. He's holding something. That's some insecticide spray. We now want to take this back to the hole where the map was and use it there, as if you check the hallway that corpse was in a little further, the beehive is at the end of it. It is huge, and there's a key item below it. And I think if you get too close to it otherwise, enough bees spawn that it becomes a pain in the ass to grab, or maybe they just outright kill you. I forget. It's been years since I tried to do that. And thus, that room has become, if not completely safe, at least safe enough that it's not really a worry anymore. Other things to note, there's a door that we can't open yet. There's also another locked door with a red herb next to it. I would recommend grabbing that red herb if you have a standalone green herb in your inventory for some reason or another, but ultimately I save on grabbing it if ever grab it, just because I have other inventory priorities. At the end of this hall where the hive is our next residence key, and if we check it, this is the key for room 003, which is the room in this room that is locked from this side rather than the other side where the red herb is. Now, I've recommended saving a good bit around this chunk of the game. If for some reason you haven't saved since like the first encounter with LT, or even since leaving the mansion, and you've been feeling good about it thus far, I still really recommend doing it right around now on a first run, because what's coming up can be a little rough. Also, there's actually nothing to really get in this bathroom, I believe, but I just like showing the visual of it, because that's a lot of roots. Gee, I wonder what's been talked about with roots recently. I'm sure it's nothing. Also, because I haven't mentioned it directly being in my inventory yet, make sure you also have the red book we got back at the lounge in the first part of the guardhouse here, because, well, here's the other red books. The shelf is lined with red books. There's one white book sandwiched in between them. Take it. Here we get the organic chemistry lab experiment. The similarities in the cellular characteristics of the rapidly growing plant infected by the tyrant virus have been reported in previous papers. However, while repeating these experiments, an interesting new fact became clear. We learned that a chemical in the UMB family, UMB number 20, contains a compound that is toxic to the cells of the plant. We have given UMB number 20 a new name, V-Jolt. If calculations prove correct, when V-Jolt is applied directly to the root of the plant, the entire plant should be dead within 5 seconds. V-Jolt can be made by simply mixing the VP and UMB chemicals in a specific ratio. However, extra care must be taken when handling these UMB chemicals. They have been known to generate toxic gas if mishandled. The characteristics of each UMB chemical are as follows. Number 3, red. Yellow 6, yellow. Number 7, green. Number 10, orange. VP-017, blue. V-Jolt, dark brown. This is touching on a side quest you could do no matter what as Jill in the game, but as Chris, I'm actually unable to do it because I actively saved Richard. In the meanwhile, we want to place the book that we got into place, and this allows us to do the next puzzle where you just need to complete the picture. This, at minimum, I believe takes 3 turns, but depending on how much you go about it, it can take a little longer. With that said, probably one of the most visually easy to decipher puzzles in the franchise. Once they're all in place, that door is open, and we now have access to the next boss fight. But before we do that, I want to talk about the side quest puzzle that book talked about. Notably, back here in the gallery, there's one other door I haven't investigated yet, and it actually ties into the puzzle we saw the hints to back in the lounge. Namely, the digits that the password requires are hinted to you by the shadows that the oil lamps leave behind. You need to match whatever eye you see to whatever color that lamp was and whatever number was on that numbered billiard ball in the lounge. So for this password would be 3, 5, and 6, and then we get into the big puzzle room. In this next room is where you can make V-Jolt to weaken the Plant 42 boss fight coming up. Sort of. Jill can make it by default, but Chris doesn't know medicine well, so he can't. With that said, if you failed to save Richard earlier in the game from the yawn poisoning, so failing to get the serum in time, if you get grabbed during the upcoming boss fight, Rebecca will come out of nowhere and you'll place her for a little bit there, and you can make V-Jolt to save Chris. There are 4 glass jars you can grab in here, and there are 3 jars you can get chemicals out of, as well as the sink you can get water in. And you have to combine them using that equation to get the V-Jolt. Effectively, you combine water, which is 1, with UMB number 3 to get NP004. Combine that with yellow 6 to get UMB number 10. Combine water and yellow 6 itself to make UMB number 7. Then combine the number 10 you made and the number 7 you made to get VP-017, and combine that with another UMB number 3 to get V-Jolt. In order to use it's a little weird though, you need to actually head back to the upper level of the Aqua Ring through the control room we did the puzzle in, as there's another door up on that upper level where we were being chased by the mama shark before she could have one-hit killed us, where the roots are flailing about. I don't think they can hurt you, but you need to use it there to weaken Plant 42, or just skip the boss fight entirely, in the case of Jill's campaign if memory serves. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in Part 8, we've got another boss fight coming up. See you guys then.